Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The VUU from the Church of the Larger Fellowship. I am Christina Rivera, and I am so excited to have a big panel for us today. We'll introduce our guests in just a few moments, and we will be talking about a business resolution, hopefully coming to a General Assembly near you this year in Providence, titled Embodying Human Rights and Investment Decisions. But before we get to that, I want to give our co-hosts an opportunity to invest and introduce themselves. I'm coming to you here from Charlottesville, Virginia, where it is just a beautiful, gorgeous day that feels like spring has already sprung. And I just know it just means that we're about to get walloped with some kind of winter event very soon, just to put us in our place. Michael, how you doing?
Good morning, Christina. I am joining you this morning from beautiful Mount Kisco, New York, from my office here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Northern Westchester. It is a beautiful, bright, clear winter day here in New York, and I'm doing okay. I have been, if you notice piles of things behind me, spending the last 3 days doing spring cleaning here in the offices at our congregation. And the other day, the religious exploration ministry team was meeting outside of my office in a little sitting area, and I was just carrying out piles of trash, and they just went, that all was in that office. It was like a clown car. So we've decided that my office is a TARDIS, and that it transports piles of garbage to alternate universes and brings them back at non-opportune times. So life is okay. Meg Riley, how are you?
Well, I will say it is bright and sunny here in the Twin Cities. I think Paige and I are sharing this lovely experience. It's -5 right now here. And I think the high today is something like nothing. We're into the depth of winter. And I'm really happy to work from home. I have not been out yet, and I don't look forward to it. So there are times when technology is definitely my friend with the weather. It's great to be here. Great to see everyone. Antonia, who is usually doing tech, is out at Meadville along with all the other Meadville students. Shout out to all of you learning. We can't wait to hear what you learn. And today, Lori Sirtosky is doing tech. Hey, Lori.
Hey everyone, I'm here from Phoenix today on an uncharacteristic gray day in the wintertime. Looking out at my balcony, seeing again some more hummingbirds. I'm loving that. I am on Twitter today and a little bit on Facebook, but mostly where we are now is YouTube. So that's where you can join us. I've put links out in our other channels so you can come over to YouTube and join the conversation. And I will make sure that your comments and questions get to our panelists and guests. So just join us and tweet on hashtag #TheVUU, TheVUU.
Thanks. And we usually do a little bit of a UU wrap up here at the beginning of the VUU. And we didn't prep one today, but I will mention that I saw a lot of my Facebook feed yesterday with Unitarian Universalists standing up for trans rights with the transphobia is sin hashtag and shouting out to trans people as divine. And that was really, really wonderful and affirming. And, if anybody has interest in learning more about that, just search the hashtag transphobia is a sin, and you'll see lots of things. Yesterday was the second anniversary of that social media campaign, and it just was really gratifying to see that. And I'll also say that that kind of work is not work that we can just do once a year. Like, in order to be doing it with integrity and to be doing it in community, we actually need to be doing it with integrity and in community. So that looks like, making sure that I'm aware of my local trans community and their needs and amplifying their voices. But that can look differently to you. But it just needs to look like something. other than just that one day. So anybody else have any things that they saw in their UU universe this week?
Yeah, I'll say a number of months ago now, we had a show that featured folks from the UU Ministers Association talking about proposed new guidelines, ethics and accountability guidelines for Unitarian Universalist ministers. And those proposed guidelines got put last year into a one-year study process that most chapters of Unitarian Universalist ministers are now engaged in. So just wanted to shout out to the folks who were on the show who did those, but just to say that many of my colleagues and myself are engaged in that study and conversations about what it means to have power differentials in ministry between ministers and between ministers and non-ordained folks, especially non-ordained religious professionals. And that at least the conversations that I was part of were really deep, good conversations that delved into anti-oppression work and how we hold ourselves accountable and how we hold ourselves accountable in relational ways and not punitive ways. They were just really deep and good conversations. And so shout out to the folks at the UUMA who put together the study guide and to everyone who's participating in those right now.
And just to say that they're having webinars the rest of this month. Some of them are for particular groups of people, and some of them are open to all ministers. And if you are a minister listening, get involved. Thanks for shouting that out, Michael.
Thanks, everyone. So I would love to introduce our guests today. Yay! We are so grateful to have Paige Ingram with us. Paige is a nomadic, Southern and Midwestern-based Black Muslim troublemaker and faith-rooted organizer and abolitionist. I love that. Paige is a facilitator, trainer, and speaker and collage artist. I've seen all of those in action, and it's amazing. She earned a master's in Middle Eastern Studies from the University of Texas at Austin in 2015, and in her work addresses anti-Blackness, policing, gentrification, anti-immigrant rhetoric and policies, as well as violence against women and non-binary people locally as well as nationally, and connecting them to broader global liberation struggles. Thank you so much for being here, Paige. Katja Hansen is the president and CEO of UU Rise, which is the UU Refugee and Immigrant Services and Education, which has a mission of advocating, advancing justice and human rights for immigrants and refugees. UU Rise is doing some really amazing work, y'all. UU Rise provides direct legal services and work with UUs and UU congregations around the US to deepen and broaden their work on immigration justice. Katja has been with UU Rise since its formation in 2007 and is thrilled to have a place where she can blend her education and experience and social work and law for a career that makes her heart sing. Thanks so much for being here, Katja. Matt Geckler is the president and founder of UU Peace Ministry Network, which is a 501c3. He's president of UU for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, also a 501c3, and member of the board of UUs of Southern Delaware. Thanks so much for being here. And Kurt Bell is a retired neuroscientist, I didn't know that, and a member of the First Unitarian Church in Portland, Oregon. He's born in the Middle East of American parents and is currently the president of the Unitarian Universalists for Justice in the Middle East organization. So thank you all so much for being here. Our regular viewers will know that it's unusual for us to have this many panelists, which is kind of the point of the show today. The business resolution that's being advanced is called Embodying Human Rights in Investment Decisions. And so I just wanted to give this group a chance to talk a little bit about what that is. But then more importantly, we're going to have a discussion about how it came to be and why these different groups are on the VUU with us today talking about this one. So I don't know if one of you just wants to take us through, maybe Kurt, if you can take us through what the business resolution actually is.
Maybe I might do that. I think I've been as involved as anyone, perhaps more so. So thank you very, very much for this opportunity to share. I think this is a really valuable business resolution for the social justice work of social justice groups within the UUA and really with the UU movement as a whole, that we can get further into the history, but we began having discussions with different social justice groups, Black Lives UU, Allies for Racial Equality, the UU Peace Ministry Network, a few others. UUSC came in also about a year and a half ago with the investment people of the UUA, particularly Kathy Mulvey, the chair of the Socially Responsible Investment Committee, but also some other members of the investment committee itself and of the Socially Responsible Investment Committee participated in that. And we had about 3 or 4 discussions over up until this past spring, early summer, and more or less agreed on the idea of beginning a business resolution to enhance the usefulness and use of investment, divestment of shareholder activism, of community investing within the UU movement as a whole. And the way we thought of this begin with is to call on the UUA investment committees to enhance their consideration of human rights issues in their decisions about investments. And this actually resonated with them. They were in the process of doing this themselves, and to develop clearer guidelines and more explicit methods for screening investments with regard to important human rights issues. And so that led to some of these fruitful discussions, and they are, I think it's very important to point out to everybody that the Socially Responsible Investment Committee of the UUA and the Investment Committee are in support of this business resolution. They see it as something that can enhance and develop and be useful to them. So the resolution itself has 2 aspects. One is to what the UUA investment committees will refuse to invest in corporations that are egregiously violate human rights. And we'll also be developing guidelines and screening methods for doing that, for pointing out where human rights violations are impacted by the role of corporations in investment. So I just might add that this is a major tool for social justice change that I think has not been as widely used among UU justice groups as it could be. And so that's part of the reason for this resolution, that we all know of the role of divestment in the changes in South Africa, but there are many other examples too. Shareholder activism, I think, recently had a very important triumph or result in that the JP Morgan Chase Bank and the US Bank Corp, and I think a few other banks, agreed following shareholder activism to no longer invest in the building of private prisons and ICE centers. So here we have a couple examples just of how corporations are deeply, deeply involved, as we all know, in our world, and they impact human rights in many, many ways, in many, many areas. So it's important, I think, to use this tool. And secondly, it's our really in that we are supporting these things with our investments. It's a kind of a moral issue not to use our money not to have our money used for purposes that we really don't support and are not in accord with our values.
So
So,
just for our
yeah.
listeners and our viewers, I want to highlight that what we're talking about is using this human rights lens for UUA investments.
Yes.
So the two groups that you mentioned, the two committees that you all are working with, are the committees that are responsible for how the UUA invests our investments, which is largely our endowment, the Common Endowment Fund, as well as other investment tools that the UUA has.
Yeah.
So that people know, like, you know, is this congregational money? Well, some of it is, because some congregations have their endowments in the Common Endowment Fund.
That's right.
And so, you know, it is, while it's specific to the UUA, this actually impacts all of our congregations potentially, you know, who have those commingled funds. So Mac, can I ask you a question about the choice, if you can speak to it or anybody else can speak to it, the choice between doing a business resolution as opposed to maybe an action of immediate witness or other tools that could have been chosen to bring this to the GA floor?
Yeah, the importance of this is that this is much more than a statement of conscience, a statement of values. If you look at the UUA bylaws and so forth, you find that if you are asking the UUA to do something, if you are in a sense encumbering the UUA, calling on them to take some action, then that becomes the format for doing that is a business resolution. So what we're talking about here is something very parallel to the environmental people that had a fossil fuel divestment business resolution in 2014 that called on the UUA, which they did, to reduce to shareholder activism level their investments in fossil fuels. I just might make one more point about the business resolution. So the one part of it is this calling on the UUA investment committees to enhance their use of human rights considerations in investment decisions and develop guidelines and mechanisms for doing that. And the second important part of it is to develop lines of communication between UU social justice groups and the UUA investment committees. Right now, I think in general, among UU social justice groups, and maybe even UUs generally, there's relatively little understanding or knowledge of the activity of the UUA investment groups. But part of the resolution is to develop panels or means of communication so that the goals of the social justice groups can have some influence over decisions of the UUA investment committees. So that's the second important part. And thirdly, about it, I would say that if these things happen, if this resolution passes and gets attention of the delegates to the General Assembly, it could enhance broadly within the UU movement, UU congregations and UU organizations like the UUSC, and even UU individuals to be a little more conscious and more active in using their investment capabilities and their investment activism to bring about the kind of changes that we want to see. So that's pretty much what I might say about this. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions.
So Paige, can you tell us a little bit about the Black Lives of UU call to action on this? Because that's one of the ways I know that I first came to know about, you know, that this was happening, and I came across my screen and I was like, oh, I wonder what that's all about. And so if you can tell us a little bit, just like how BLUU came to be involved in this and the call to action.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. So I really need to shout out my comrade Takia Amin, who has been holding down the partnership and really keeping the rest of the organizing collective in the know about what's going on, asking for us to give feedback on, you know, on drafts and like read through things And I think for BLUU, what has been really dope from my perspective as an organizer is the fact that since we are such a new organization, we've been like super intentional about like how we're spending our money and like what does that look like, and for, you know, software things that we are utilizing, like where is this from and what's going on. And so I think it really does for us seem like a very natural fit to really encourage people, because to me this is like a very people power thing. Yes, we're talking about institutions, but from my perspective and from the perspective of the organization, this is an opportunity for folks to understand more about the inner workings of our faith in some ways that that we might not be as privy to. An opportunity for individuals to feel empowered to make some decisions and have their voices be heard about like what is feeling right and what is feeling in alignment. BLUU just had a year last year that was, you know, totally dedicated around theology, or as Michael, our Reverend, is really honing in on, is this notion of beology. So how are we embodying our beliefs? And part of that is how are we like what is the foundations for the ways in which we are organizing and coming together. And for a lot of folks, and also not, that might be a congregation or that's the association. And so we wanted to make sure that our folks have an understanding of what's going on, while also recognizing that for this process, like the ask is for people in congregations to collect signatures in a very physical way. And a lot of our folks like may or may not be part of a congregation. And so what is the role of the individual who identifies as a UU, who is becoming more and more serious about interrogating the ways that they can live our values? How can we put our money where our mouth is, literally? And so we want to draft a call to action to not just for our folks, but just for the people, you know, throw something on Medium and like put it out there in the world, and hopefully have folks like Christina and other people be like, what's going on with this? Let me click and check in. Let me understand about what the process is. What are we investing in? What does this all mean? I might, for an organizer like me based out of Minneapolis, like I've been part of all sorts of different boycotts and divestment movements around like Standing Rock, for example, where folks were like, hey, we're not rolling with Wells Fargo anymore. We're not rolling with the US Bank anymore. How can we, like, this is something that's directly tied to people's everyday lives. People are really transforming their understandings about their relationship with money and recognizing the power that they have as consumers. And so really this is about a larger faith conversation. And it's also about what are the incremental ways that we can transform our communities through our purchasing power. So that's why we really want to throw down with this. That's why I put out the call to action, and really, you know, still definitely asking, hey, if you want, collect some signatures, talk to some people. That's how we learn more about this. So, yep.
I love it. So Katya, how did you rise come into the conversation?
Good morning, and thanks for having me here. URise, I think we originally got the call and the email from Curtis Bell and asking us to participate, I think in part because of the work that we did for an action of immediate witness a couple of years ago, and URise was able to work with the peace ministries and with the UU Justice in the Middle East about you know, looking at detentions and that detention centers. And that was part of the broader conversation that people have been having, is wanting to understand where their money goes. And what I would say is that social justice activists often are saying, how do we do this better? Exactly like Paige was explaining, how do we be intentional and mindful about where our money goes? But we don't always have the time and energy to be the ones that are trying to figure out where that is and how that works. It's easy when it's Halliburton, right? Or it's easy when it's, something big. But what about Amazon? And what about Microsoft? And what about, GE Electric? And what about all of these other companies that have multiple subsidiaries and do multiple things? So we were so excited that the experts at the UUA and the socially responsible investing were excited about taking a look at this, because what I learned in those initial conversations were that they were very interested in being more socially responsible and socially conscious, but being experts in banking and investing, they didn't necessarily have the same ability to articulate what some of the social justice challenges would be. So by bringing together the social justice organizations and let us be the experts in the social justice side, there's a whole unpacking and problematic with that, but to shorthand it, the people who work consistently in social justice, let us, provide that information and provide that connection, and let the people who are in charge of the investing, and that's their area of expertise, bring that together rather than, trying to ask us to become the experts or asking them to become the experts. So it felt like such a perfect way to do justice work together, where we are playing on each other's strengths, and where we're doing so mindfully, which allows for more mindful investing, more transparent investing. I know our congregation at Palomar UU and Vista is very excited to see what's going to come out of this. So it helps inform the decisions that we will make. And that's part of the goal, is how do we make this a little bit easier for everyone?
Yeah, I think that marriage that you're talking about, that collaboration between, folks who know the business world and investing world really, really well. And shout out to our investment committees and, the folks that have been doing shareholder investment advocacy in the UUA. That has been I think something that people don't know as much as they should, how the UUA has been, I was going to say, tried to make movements in those industries, but they've actually not just tried, they've succeeded.
And I just have to mention Tim Brennan, the former
Absolutely.
treasurer, who just really did amazing work and brought that into the UUA some time ago. And so it's really exciting to hear all of these groups working on this together.
Yeah, and Tim's going to continue working, doing shareholder investment, even in his kind of semi-retirement or whatever it is he's calling it. But yeah, the fact that we finally realized we need to bring all of that, together into the same place of people who understand that whole investment side, but people who are, actually doing work for liberation. So that's just makes me so happy. So Matt Keckler, what has your group, what has this process felt like for you all?
We've back in 2007, we were working on peacemaking as part of a study action item, and as part of the core team, we were trying to figure out what are we going to do to keep it going, and that's how we got the Peace Mission Network. And it included a whole list of things we would do. It didn't specifically list this item, but I guarantee you it fits exactly what we do. Specifically, that came during the Iraq War. And basically, we are still concerned about war. Seems to be endless. And we're very concerned about companies we would invest in who are profiting from war. GE being one of them, because they make jet engines for war machines. So we really have been concerned about this, and Kurt and I have been talking about this for some years now. This is a serious issue, and that money in the joint endowment committee, excuse me, don't fund, is our money. We need to use it wisely, how we invest, and that's what we're here about. And yes, this is a coalition of various groups who are involved in this, and we've been talking about this on the exhibit hall floor for some years now, and this is something we need to do, and I'm glad we're finally getting to this point.
I am too. It's really exciting to see, you know, when the co-host talked about this show, one of the things that we really wanted to talk about was the collaboration between the groups, because I think in years past, we would have seen something like this come from one single group. And when that happens, the lens that's used on, you know, the crafting of the business resolution or resolution or whatever it is, tends to be, you know, narrowly focused. And so I think my question to Paige and to Katya are, you know, how does it feel to have this done in a different way? I think just we can think back in years past, recent past, where we've seen resolutions come to the floor that have been very narrowly focused, and some of the pain that comes out of that when the discussions kind of erupt on the GA floor about that. So I just ask, you know, how does this feel different?
Well, I'm happy to chime in, like as a person who is still like very new to this community, and like learning the processes, and also who has like worked every single GA and like not really known like the business thing that's been going on. So like for me, it really, like, the experience feels like this is what it's like, how could anything else actually be possible? And also recognizing and honoring that, like, that hurt. And it just reinforces, I think, for BLUU, I can only speak for, is like the importance of coalition building in a meaningful way, right? So there's a distinction between at the 11th hour asking somebody to sign for something versus saying, this is my idea, I've been thinking about this, I want to collaborate, I don't have ownership over this, let's roll up our sleeves and work together. And so this is, I'm hoping that this is just a model of what's possible for folks. I'm hoping that people that, like myself and like others who are, I think, coming into a UU world with a lowercase w that is different, and that is feeling more in alignment with what we know we believe in. And so that's the exciting part about this collaboration is, and also to be like, this is not BLUU coming in and being like, well, let me tell y'all about the Black issues, right? That we're coming in with an understanding that that we're talking about human rights across the board, that we're talking about that so many of these issues are all intersecting around Blackness, and that we're not being asked to be a token organization or a representation of the Black voice or the Black experience, because I feel like I'm always saying this, and I always will, that like no group is a monolith. And so yes, this is something that's collaborative, but also I think it's important to kind of discuss the inner workings of what is ideal collaboration, and like what can we learn, and then how can we continue to improve and be better, and let other people in on what worked and what didn't. So I'm excited about that. And excited about really Kurt taking an hour of his time just yesterday to be like, hey, so what do you think? That feels very meaningful. So yeah.
I would piggyback on that and say that, Mac alluded to it earlier when he said these conversations have been going on the floor of the exhibit hall for a number of years. And that's where so many of us have the opportunity to spend time together at General Assemblies because, our groups are spread across the country. And so some of these ideas have been percolating, but really, I think that there's been so much more intentional movement in the past 5 years, past 3 years even, about being intersectional and about really making sure that voices are heard, and that as we are creating the table for this discussion, we're looking and saying, who's not here and who else should be here, and not trying to plug them in at the last minute. And so I just want to acknowledge that Drum has participated in some of the meetings from the beginning as well. And, every organization has to kind of balance how much time and energy they have to put into it. And thankfully, we've had fearless leaders like Kurt, who's kind of kept the whole vessel together so that, the different organizations can be involved and participate in a way that's meaningful and realistic for their organization. But that it was done very intentionally, of each time wanting to say, wanting to look at, is there someone who's not here who should be here? Are there voices that we haven't heard from yet? And have we created the space so that the voices are saying what they need to say? And again, I think that this, could be and should be one of the models for collaboration, of saying, from the beginning, let's do this so that we're not doing harm, and so that we're not causing hurt. Having been involved in General Assemblies since 2010, I think was my first one in Minneapolis. This is the first time I've seen this level of collaboration. It certainly may have happened and I didn't know about it, but it's the first time that immigration has been intentionally included in on this. And so the first time URISE has been intentionally included in, and we're really excited about what that means, not only for the investing that the UUA is going to be doing, but for what that means of how we work together and how these groups can come together in the future. Because I think we all felt that there was a value added by every group.
I'm curious, both Paige and Katya have alluded to best practices in collaboration. And if there are models if there are places that know this well, that you look to for wisdom, or if this is an improv experiment, and also if there are other religious groups who are doing this kind of holistic human rights investment work that are good models.
I could reply briefly to the last question, then let Katya and Paige respond to the first part. Yes, the Methodists, their pension fund has developed a human rights screen for their investments that is broad-based human rights. And I believe that the Episcopal Church has followed their lead in doing that. So there are other denominations that have affirmed the need for a broad-based human rights screening of investments.
I'd have to question if the Methodists were including GLBT people in their screens, but yeah, thank you.
That's it.
Well, I'm happy to uplift. I really actually want to uplift like youth organizing and student organizing in particular, to be a model around all different sorts of divestment initiatives, and also like provides a model of collaboration that I think that we could all learn from. I went to UT, a public university for graduate school, and I think that the lessons learned that I think are applied here and that can continue to be applied like in a setting like this is, especially when you're working with, there's no budget, folks are really busy. You're trying to like bring on, I mean, this is like a battleground of like so many things. And so this notion of being able to come together, to build relationships, to figure out what a coalition looks like, and navigating like some real David and Goliath type of dynamics, particularly when you're talking about investment from a public institution standpoint. Universities are really laying some amazing groundwork on that and showing resilience in ways that I haven't seen in a lot of spaces. So shout out to the Methodists, and also shout out to, you know, the 18 to 25-year-old people who are who I think are just kind of learning as they're doing it, and also paying close attention to history and what has worked. So
yeah, I think I definitely agree about the youth-led movement and young adult-led movement in shareholder investing has been huge in the past, 3 to 5 years. We've just seen the ways that they've been able to move, particularly university investments, has been really large. And I think that links to something that I heard Mac say earlier about, that this is our money, and we have a responsibility to be using it in ways that that meet our values, and that and I think particularly, when I think about the UUA Common Endowment Fund, and I think about the ways that fund was built, and the backs of people who a lot of that money has come from, and the colonized way in which endowments were built in Unitarian and Universalist and Unitarian Universalist congregations. Until we have that conversation, like about where that money really came from, I think at the least we can do is have this conversation about how we are using those funds. So I really appreciate, Mac, you highlighting, how we're trying to bring that that value lens to our investments. Michael, Tina, did you have anything? I didn't want to cut you out.
No, it's all right. I did notice that there are some online comments that probably we should bring in. Someone asked if this video would be available later to show to the finance committee at their congregation, and the answer is yes. All of our VUU episodes are available on, I believe, on YouTube. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong with that, especially now that we're broadcasting on it. And Lori from Behind the Chalice wonders, how would you respond to folks who are wondering if the corporations are just too big and no amount of divestment or boycotting will make a difference? Are there success stories we can use to change people inclined toward apathy? So I'm wondering if you all know of success stories, especially with boycotting and divestment. Certainly, we know that UUA shareholder activism has made some really dramatic changes in large corporations in the United States. The UUA was, with our Common Endowment Fund, shareholder activism led the way to really amazing corporate policies toward LGBT people at Home Depot, for example. That's one particular
And
place where
Verizon.
we were successful. And Verizon also?
And I know that we've been at Walmart meetings. I don't know that we've had success.
Yeah. But we keep trying, and that's good, right? But so certainly the shareholder activism, we have specific stories of success, and maybe Tim will come on and talk about that in the future. But I'm wondering if you all know of stories where divestment and boycotting has actually changed corporate practices or led to changes in social situations for people.
Well, I would certainly, I think the great example is the South African end of apartheid, that when it became an economic price for these corporations to continue their support for the South African apartheid government, they cut relations. And that was a big factor, I think, in end of apartheid. The Great Boycott, I think, raised the consciousness and to a degree wages among farm workers was very successful. The Tumakali tomato farmers in Florida benefited from boycotts. Probably, I think there are many examples of where this has raised consciousness and even had real specific results.
Yeah, the tomato workers got what, Chipotle and Wendy's and some really major fast food joints to change their behavior, which was pretty impressive.
Yeah, and McDonald's and Burger King too, I think, because it was about what they were paying for tomatoes that were going into their ketchup, and how that amount that they were paying did or did not translate to wages in the field. So yeah, so that's a success right here in the United States. I mean, farm workers are still mistreated in the United States. Let's just be real. But you know, they're slightly less mistreated than they used to be. So I wanted to bring in the online questions, Christine.
Yeah.
Thank
Also,
you.
somebody asked online if we still need signatures, and I wondered what is where is that, the signature gathering?
Yeah, we're close to, I think we're past the absolute minimum that we need, which is 10 signatures from each of 25 different congregations, all certified as members of those congregations. But we're still continuing to gather signatures. It's a very good, as Paige mentioned, it's an educational tool to tell people about this resolution and get them and the issue of the resolution. And by getting more signatures than the absolute minimum, we show that there's a momentum for this and an interest in this resolution. We would have liked to have started gathering signatures the end of October, but we kind of wanted to wait until we had a confirmation by the investment committees that they supported this. And that didn't come until toward the end of December. So we've only had the end of December and January to gather signatures. So we won't have as many as we might have liked to have had, but I think we're well on our way to having enough. But anybody that would like to gather signatures at their congregation, wonderful. We have information about that on the UUJME Facebook page. They can write to me, kurt.c.bell@gmail.com, to get the necessary forms and information. So great if somebody would like to gather signatures in their congregation. We're very enthusiastic about that.
Yeah, and I think it really says something that waiting for that endorsement by the investment committees and then being able to get those signatures in the short amount of time. I think that there's some correlation between how well collaborative this effort has been and the fact that you're already past that mark. I think certainly when I was looking at it, as soon as I got in there and looked at all of the groups that had endorsed it and that you had intentionally made a way for everybody to have a voice at the table really said a lot to me. So I think that, and particularly the investment groups, because so often we forget that there's like real human beings in those investment groups volunteering their time and effort, and they are some of the unsung heroes. They don't get a lot of board time play or I think people would be hard pressed to even name one person that they may know.
But I'd like to give a big shout out to Kathy Mulvey, the chair of the Socially Responsible Investment Committee here. She's been with us on these conversations we've had over the last year and a half. She's been very conscientious and helpful in both communicating with us and with her colleagues on the other on the investment committees.
And there
I
was
just wanted to do
oh, sorry, Katja, go ahead.
I just wanted to
Go
do a quick clarification that Wendy's is actually the holdout on the tomatoes and the Immokalee workers. So McDonald's, Subway, Burger King, Taco Bell have signed on, but Wendy's is the only one that hasn't. So there's still an active call for a boycott against Wendy's. And Lori, I just sent you the link in case anyone would like to express their outrage to Wendy's. The Coalition of Immokalee Workers makes it really easy.
So some folks online had asked about how signatures work at CLF. So Meg, I'm wondering if you have an opinion on that. If those of us, I'm a member of CLF. If I want to sign on to this and have my signature certified as a member of CLF, how might that work? Those of us who are scattered all over the
Well, excitingly, somebody online volunteered to gather them. So I want to thank Darby for that. And I think the way it would happen would be the way it would happen in any congregation, except you do it remotely instead of standing in coffee hour. But we would check and make sure that you were members, and we could, I think, probably pretty easily get 25 signatures from CLF members.
I wonder if the UUA will accept remote signatures. Do we have any idea? I mean, if I email Darby and say, sign me up.
I guess, I don't know. I'll fight with them if they
No.
won't. I don't know. We're a congregation.
Okay, there we go. Yes.
Great. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Darby.
And we've gathered signatures before for other things, but yeah, you never know. That they're working it out. They're really trying to make things more accessible, the UUA. So good for them.
One thing I'd like to mention is that beside doing this work, making companies behave, which they won't, it's important for us to live out our values, even if it doesn't affect these companies. It's important for our EU people to realize that we are working together, meaning the UA and the social justice groups, to come to a commonality of how to deal with this, the intersectionality here, and how we're moving forward. Because a lot of people think General Assembly is a mystery. What are they doing up there? What are they doing up in Boston? And I think it's important to recognize that we are actually living out our values by saying, okay, we don't want to invest in this company. It's not going to bother them whether we do or not, but it bothers me. And I think it's important for people to understand that.
Thanks, Mac. Yeah, I was just noticing, oh, sorry, Michael, that the Jane Fonda led Friday things right now, we're really focused on Chase Bank last week. People were getting arrested at Chase Bank, which Paige mentioned the pipelines, and Chase Bank was another huge funder of pipelines. And so the intersectionality, the corporations do intersectionality really well. They oppress on everybody. So it makes a lot of sense for us to respond in kind. But I was delighted to see them at a corporation, because there's some point, I know when I used to help, listen in really on the Holding India work, that the activists there, who are amazing activists, the Indian activists funded by the Holding program of the UUA, were saying, what do you do at the point at which actually it's not elected officials anymore, it's corporations that are running the country? And we don't admit that here, that we live in a plutocracy and that corporations really, in so many ways, are running all of the politicians of both parties. But to me, this is a key way to act for democracy as small as we might feel doing it, and to celebrate the victories of our colleagues who have impact.
Totally. And I think like with that, like taking like the work around the pipelines, and I think divestment and boycott can also lead to conversations and around alternatives, right? So I know a lot of folks had no idea, like, I can bank it, I could have my money in something besides like the 3 or 5 banks that I hear commercials for and that everybody else is banking at. Like, these are like, there are so many ways that the impacts of these types of movements ripple across the country and around the world, regardless of whatever type of economic impact that it might have on the corporation or lack thereof. So that's like the other exciting part about all this, is to go for this initiative. So if we are divesting from these companies, what are some companies that we can invest in that traditionally may not get as many investment opportunities? So there it creates an opening for us to continue to think outside of the box and to support companies and organizations that are underfunded or under-resourced.
And I was going to say, I think Christina mentioned this at the top of the hour, but when the hosts of the VUU talk about topics, when this topic came up, the thing that really excited us was the way that all of these groups were working together. And so, Mac, you say it's important that we live our values. And I think part of living our values is that our investment people are in active conversation with BLUU and with DRUM and with a coalition of justice organizations, a broad coalition of justice organizations like UURISE and the Peace Network and JME, and Ministry for the Earth is also involved in this. I mean, this is a broad coalition of justice organizations, and also people of color organizations in Unitarian Universalism. And so the fact that I think it's important for us to live the conversations in our investment, like it's living our values in the conversations with our investment people about how we do this work, because I think that can be a model for how we do other work too, and like what the next filter that gets put on our investment is, because we come up with new ones, and that's fine because it's it's good. So
I might mention a couple specific things. The UUA has about 2% of it. The UU Common Endowment Fund invests about 2 to 3% of its money in community investing, which means that they provide monies to groups that would not get investments, would not get loans from traditional sources, but nevertheless are reliable, healthy places to put money. Banks in marginal communities, sustainability projects of one kind or another. And I think what would be very clear to me is that the UU justice groups would have a much better idea of what communities might be deserving of such financial aid from the UUA than would people who are on the investment committees, who by and large are on financial boards of financial organizations and are not in touch with the different communities that might benefit from help by the and investments from the UU Common Endowment Fund. So that's just the specific way in which I think communication in both directions could be very helpful.
Well, we are at the top of our hour. I want to thank so much Paige and Katya and Mac and Kurt for coming on and telling us more about this. We look forward to the discussion at General Assembly about this business resolution. I think it is going to be just a different way of being and living out our values. And I think we're going to see that on the GA floor. So thank you all so much. Next week, we have the authors of Sparks of Wonder, a theme-based ministry for whole life congregation, which is a Skinner book. We'll be welcoming Becky Brooks and Erica Hewitt. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.